But to start off this podcast, I want to look at the Denver Nuggets. This is a team that we've known has been formidable for several years now. 2023 NBA champions. They're currently fourth in the Western Conference at a record of 44-27. They're a formidable team, and there's no doubt about that. They have Jokic, the three-time MVP, wrestling for a possible fourth MVP, which is just blowing my mind. That's just really insane. We're just doing it again. And we know their starting lineup is the real deal. Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. I mean, those guys form a really great five. And I mean, they're fourth in the West, but man, they're right there battling for second, third place with the other teams we're going to talk about. So my first question when I really think about the Denver Nuggets, Kelly, is, man, do they have enough depth to really make a run at another championship?
I think the problem with Denver this year, and maybe it's a bit different than the year they won the title, when you had the depth in terms of Reggie Jackson, Jeff Green, even Bones Highland. You look at guys like Bruce Brown. They had a number of key names that were able to, even though some of them were 3D, guys that were plug and play, they had enough healthy bodies to throw at teams on a nightly basis that when you sprinkle in, Jamal Murray's, his actions, and then you have the Joker and the greatness that he is, it was able to be by and large head and shoulders above the rest of the competition on a night-to-night basis. Now, what you have is a kind of a depleted roster in terms of the overall pizzazz of names, and you have guys like Julian Strawther, Jim Pickett, Zeke Naji, guys who are good NBA players, but in terms of trying to make a run, I don't think it's enough. And that's kind of the reason why he's had such a great case for MVP this season, is because he's had to use this roster, which is less than stellar. And he's been having to deal with injuries. He had to deal with Jamal Murray trying to find himself again after injury. And he's been able to have this sustained level of excellence in terms of just the way he impacts the game on both sides now. And just you seeing how much of a talent he is. I don't think when the playoffs come, I don't think that they're going to have enough spark, enough juice to get past the second round, get to conference finals. But, for the time being, given what they've had to endure this season and the loss that they've had in the offseason, it should be considered a success to get to this point, even though I think they're going to win at least 50 games, which is going to be a win for them.
Yep.
And, the problem with Denver is that I don't think the bench has enough shooting in terms of high volume, to sustain them in a playoff series. And that's why I think they'll get caught up.
I mean, you look at what they have in Westbrook, for example. I mean, this is pretty much their best player that's not starting right now, their best bench player. He's been great this season. I mean, it amazes me that he's 36 and he is still stuffing the stat sheet every night. I mean, this is classic Westbrook stuff that we've seen for a lot of years now. And he kind of calls into question the shooting, like you were just talking about with the bench there. He is not a guy that defenses are going to honor from night to night, especially when you get in a playoff scenario. If you're having him out there with another non-shooter, it really kind of complicates things from an offensive perspective. Now, there are ways to get around that. He's been great playing with Jokic. I think those two make a really great pairing. Just looking at the way that Westbrook gets downhill, loves to cut, loves to kind of catch the defense lacking if they sag off of him, kind of getting backdoor looks, getting fast break looks. He's still great at all that stuff, just hustling for the ball, getting boards. He's a positive player still. There's no doubt about that. But in a playoff scenario, you're looking for guys that can really give you the kind of spark you were talking about, create easy baskets, take some pressure off of Jokic and Murray. That's where the questions kind of come in as far as his play goes. So, no, I think that's a great point for sure. We're gonna have to.
And I think the thing about Russ, to your point, and we've seen this in the past, is that because his game is so deemed on power and force and athleticism, and in his previous stops in LA, the reason why those times weren't as successful as they are now is because he was asked to do a number of things that he wasn't comfortable with, right? They asked him to spot up in the corner at times and kind of wait his turn, trying to play behind LeBron, and that's something that comes with it. But now in Denver, you're seeing him kind of fit with players that are similar to him in the way he thinks the game, in terms of quick, aggressive, fast making decisions. The issue with that was that come playoff time, he's been in the playoffs long enough to know that teams are going to sag off him, in the half court. He's going to have to make maybe 3-4 threes a game to keep defenses honest. And I think he's shooting around 35% this year from three, which is for him, that's pretty good. That's better than average for him.
Yeah.
But in the playoffs, and this, the game slows down, defenses shrink. You're gonna see a lot more zone. And if he's not able to consistently beat them on threes, even though he's a smart cutter, he can be in the dunker. There are ways to get him involved in the half court that can keep the team efficient offensively, but the playoffs is a different game. And I don't think Russ in a vacuum is enough of an X factor to give them the edge in the series over, say, a Golden State or even a Minnesota or something like that.
Right. That shooting in the bench, I think those are all huge issues for sure. I think another question mark that I have when it comes to the Nuggets is their ability to get stops on a consistent basis. Yeah. Looking at their defensive rating this season, man, I mean, it's not great. I mean, they're in the bottom third of the league. They're 22nd right now in defensive rating. Historically, when you look at title contenders, you're going to be top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating
all year long.
Yep. I mean, those are hallmarks of a champion right there. You look at what the Boston Celtics have on those ends of the floor, and the Thunder and the Cavaliers. The Nuggets just don't have that kind of balance from night to night that you would expect a title team to have. So, from that perspective, I don't think they have what it takes to consistently buckle down when it's time to get a stop, when it's time to lock in and stop some of those top threats from around the NBA. I just don't think it's going to happen. What I will say, though, a positive for Denver this season, man, with the departure of KCP, man, I mean, they really needed Christian Brown to step up
in a big way. Yeah.
Big way, man. I've been very impressed by what he's brought to the table. 15 points per game this season, 5 boards, shooting 38, almost 39% on threes. From the field, he's at 57. Effective field goal percentage is 62.5. He's been super efficient. Another guy that can do a little bit of everything when it comes to just like, hey, he's a guy that just kind of fits the mold of like, hey, what does the team need from me tonight? Is it to be a defensive guy, take on one of the tough defensive assignments on the perimeter? Do I need to play off of Jokic? Do I need to hit some spot up threes? Whatever the situation calls for, he's been up to the challenge. So I will say that he's kind of like that X factor for them in a way. Like if Christian really hooping like that next to the others, I mean, that raises the bar for sure when it comes to like what Denver can do on a night-to-night basis.
And I think, had it not been for what Cade is doing in Detroit, I think Christian was going to be, a pretty strong favorite for most improved. 100%. And I say that understanding that, typically when we look at these awards, most improved typically comes down to, people look at the stat sheet and seeing who had a year-over-year increase, in the biggest margin. The thing about Christian Braun's game is that when you look at his usage, everything he's doing is the exact same he did last season in terms of how he's used on the court and the half court. It's not like he went from a 16% usage rate to like a 22, and this is the end result. No, this is the same guy that's been there since he was drafted. He's an excellent shooter, a tenacious defender. He's smart with the ball in his hands. He's a perfect, if you were to craft, role players around Nikola Jokic, Christian Braun is going to be one of those guys because he's going to be willing to take on the toughest assignment and not complain about it. And he's going to give you 110% effort every time he's on the floor. So I think his emergence this season is a big reason why Denver was able to stomach some of those losses in the offseason. Now, the playoffs is going to be the biggest test of seeing how much his growth has actually helped them, because I think a few weeks ago, the Phoenix game where he was able to show up late in the fourth quarter in overtime, that kind of showed you what kind of player he can be when the lights are brightest. Now I want to see, it's been 2 years since Denver, 3 years since they won the title. What does Christian Braun's game look like game 1, 2025, first round? That's going to be the king for me.
Yeah, he's had his moments in the playoffs before, but his role was different. He was a bench guy back then. They still had KCP, but now
the spotlight wasn't on him as much. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. So it's a totally different ball game for him, for sure. One other guy I wanted to talk about when it comes to the Nuggets this season, It honestly does give them a chance to win a playoff series if he's playing like this consistently. Jamal
Jamal
Murray
Murray. Yeah.
it's fascinating. You look at how he starts seasons; it's totally different from how he ends the season. I went on Basketball Reference and I split it up from the first 32 games he played to the most recent 29 games he played. In the first 32, he was at about 19 points a game. He was only about 43% from the field, 37% from three. So I mean, he was inefficient. He just kind of a little bit unsure of himself.
Yeah, it was floating through those games. Like when you watch him, he was just
Yeah,
like in and out. Yeah,
exactly. But you look at the last 29, and by the way, they're 19-10 in those 29 games.
yeah,
He's at 24 points per game, at about 51% from the field and 42% from three. So I mean, those are two totally different seasons, and this
yeah.
happens every year. He gets to the second half and he just takes off. So if Jamal is playing like that, you got Jokic. If Christian's up to the task, I mean, hey, who knows? I wouldn't call them a favorite by any means, but you got to give them a chance in a series as long as they don't burn out from not having that kind of depth next to them that they had in the past.
Right. And Jamal has always been, that big game type of player in terms of how he shows up in those big time moments. And go back to what you said, if you look at even if you even increase that to his production since the All-Star break, he's shooting almost 50% from three
Yeah,
on
crazy
high
stuff.
volume.
Yeah,
This is a guy that has been there before in those moments. He's done that. It's taken him some time to come back from injury because that's never an easy thing for these guys to go through. But if he's shown that he can be a dependable number two guy, when his
for
number
sure.
is called. And I
Mhm.
think the good thing about Jamal is that the way he approaches the game, especially the way he approaches downhill scenarios, he's able to get in and out of his breaks like a receiver in terms of he's just quick. He makes a cut, makes a decision, and he goes. And I think that really helps Mike Malone in terms of how he can structure placing guys like Christian and having cutters like Russ. And even if you want to bring in the backup like Zignaji, and there are ways that Denver can construct these games where even if their roster has maybe 6 or 7 guys, because of their core is so elite and so talented, you should trust them, in a series. Now, am I saying they're going to be favorites? No, I think the West is as tough as ever, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them, regardless of where they finish in the season standings. But it's pretty hard to count them out, just because of what they've done and because of the cachet that Jamal Murray has built in this league, as long as it's been here. So I think anytime you have those two guys, and you have an X factor in Christian Braun, you have to give a little bit of trust in Jamal and Mike Malone and Jokic. Like, this is a dangerous team. No matter what you said, the more I talk about it, the more I'm almost talking myself into putting them in the second round. Because of they're such an elite team in terms of when they need to most. The defense is slacked off for sure, but I think Jamal, we've seen him at times be an aggressive point of attack defender. I'm not saying he's going to be an All NBA guy by any means. I'm not saying he's going to be a lockdown point guard, but you just need to win 4 games in the series to advance, 4 in advance. And they have enough, to get them, 4 games. Now, I'm not sure how long that lasts, but I think to your point, Jamal has really turned around the second half of the year, and it's going to give them some juice.